The FBI searched Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate as part of an investigation into whether he took classified records from the White House to his Florida residence. People familiar with the matter said, a dramatic and unprecedented escalation of law enforcement scrutiny of the former president. Trump, disclosing the search in a lengthy statement, asserted that agents had opened a safe at his home and described their work as an unannounced raid that he likened to prosecutorial misconduct. He was in New York, planning to meet later Tuesday at his Bedminster, New Jersey, club with members of the Republican Study Committee, a group headed by Representative Jim Banks of Indiana that says it is committed to putting forth his priorities in Congress. Monday's search intensified the months-long probe into how classified documents ended up in boxes of White House records located at Mar-a-Lago earlier this year. A separate grand jury is investigating efforts to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election, and it all adds to potential legal peril for Trump as he lays the groundwork for another run. About 24 Trump supporters stood in protest at mid-morning Tuesday in the Florida summer heat and sporadic light rain on a bridge near the former president's residence. One held a sign reading, "Democrats are fascists," while others carried flags saying, "2020 was rigged, Trump 2024, and Biden's name with an obscenity." Some cars honked in support as they passed. Familiar battle lines, forged during a 4-year presidency shadowed by investigations, quickly took shape again Monday night. Trump and his allies sought to cast the search as a weaponization of the criminal justice system and a Democratic-driven effort to keep him from winning another term in 2024. Though the Biden White House said it had no prior knowledge of it, the current FBI director, Christopher Wray, was appointed by Trump 5 years ago. "These are dark times for our nation, as my beautiful home, Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, Florida, is currently under siege, raided, and occupied by a large group of FBI agents," Trump wrote. "Nothing like this has ever happened to a president of the United States before."
Powerful explosions rocked a Russian airbase in Crimea on Tuesday, killing one person and wounding several others, authorities said. Russia's defense ministry said munitions blew up at the Saki base, and it emphasized that the installation had not been shelled. But Ukrainian social networks were abuzz with speculation that it was hit by Ukrainian-fired long-range missiles. There was no immediate comment from Ukrainian authorities. Videos posted on social networks showed sunbathers fleeing a nearby beach as huge clouds of smoke from the explosions rose over the horizon. If the base was, in fact, struck by the Ukrainians, it would mark the first known major attack on a Russian military site on the Crimean Peninsula, annexed by the Kremlin in 2014, and a significant escalation of the conflict.
Republican Ilhan Omar, one of the biggest stars of the left, is facing a centrist challenger in her Minnesota congressional primary on Tuesday, while Vermont Democrats will choose a nominee for an open House seat who will likely make history as the first woman representing the state in Congress. Another key race is unfolding in western Wisconsin, where Democratic-Republican Ron Kind's retirement after 26 years in office opens up a seat in a district that has been trending Republican. Among the candidates running in the Republican primary to replace Kind is a former Navy SEAL who attended the Stop the Steal rally in Washington on January 6, 2021, which preceded the insurrection at the U.S. Capitol. Minnesota is also holding a special election to fill the remaining months of Republican Jim Hagedorn's term after his death earlier this year from cancer. And voters will be picking nominees for a full term representing the largely rural, Republican-leaning district.
The European Commission expects Greek authorities to thoroughly examine allegations stemming from a spyware scandal, an EU official has said. Any attempt by national security services to illegally access data of citizens, including journalists and political opponents, if confirmed, is unacceptable, Anita Hipper, the European Commission's spokesperson on Home Affairs, said at the institution's daily news briefing on Tuesday. The remarks came after Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis admitted on Monday that the National Intelligence Service (EYP) wiretapped opposition leader and former EU lawmaker Nikos Androulakis. According to the EU executive body, it is the responsibility of member states to control their national security services and to examine breaches of fundamental rights, including freedom of expression and data protection, HIPAA explained. The European Commission expects the national authorities to thoroughly examine any of such allegations to restore citizens' trust, she added. EU lawmaker Sophie in 't Veld, who is the rapporteur of the European Parliament's special PEGA committee probing the use of spyware by EU member states, also called for EU agencies to launch an investigation. According to the Dutch politician, the European Public Prosecutor's Office and Europol, the bloc's law enforcement cooperation agency, should examine the Greek surveillance scandal. In a tweet, she reminded that the EU institutions, the European Parliament and the European Commission were both affected by the spyware scandals in which EU governments, who are also members of the third key EU institution, European Council, were spying on citizens for political reasons. Greek journalist Thanasis Koukakis, who was also under surveillance, will appear in front of the EU Parliament's PEGA committee later this month, while Androulakis is also expected to testify later. In a televised address to the nation, Mitsotakis acknowledged that Androulakis, leader of the Socialist PASOK party, was wiretapped by the state's intelligence agency, but denied he knew about the surveillance. Although everything was done legally, the EYP underestimated the political dimension of this action. It was formally okay, but politically unacceptable, Mitsotakis claimed. The announcement followed the resignation of EYP head Andreas Kontolian and the Prime Minister's General Secretary Grigoris Dimitriadis on Friday. The scandal erupted last week when Kontolian told a parliamentary committee that his agency had been spying on journalist Thanasis Koukakis. The parliamentary probe was launched after Androulakis complained to top prosecutors about an attempt to hack his cell phone with Israeli-made predator tracking software.
On August 4, West Texas Intermediate, the U.S. crude oil benchmark, went below $90 a barrel for the first time since the Russia-Ukraine conflict broke out in February. Also, on the same day, the price of the global benchmark for crude oil, Brent, which is used to price other crude grades traded globally, dropped below $95. Early in the year, oil prices rose as the conflict between Russia and Ukraine added to supply-side worries. Brent oil reached close to its all-time high of $139 in March, and since then, worries of an economic slowdown have grown. Last week at an OPEC summit, the top oil-producing nations decided to increase output in September by 100,000 barrels per day, or roughly 0.1% of the world's oil market. But even with that output growth rate, OPEC Plus is unlikely to succeed in their target, as the bloc's compliance with the production deal was already above 300% in June. This indicates that most producers are already having difficulty meeting their quotas and will continue to do so, analysts say. Dangers associated with the ongoing conflict in Ukraine could also quickly raise prices back to at least $100 per barrel. Here are some other wild cards out there that could send gas prices climbing again. Since Russian gas giant Gazprom reduced throughput on Nord Stream 1, the most significant Russian pipeline to Germany, to just 20% of its capacity, natural gas prices in Europe have risen even more recently. Additionally, the Kremlin has frequently issued subliminal threats to cut off or maintain low natural gas supply in Europe during winter. The main continental European natural gas benchmark, Dutch TTF, is now trading at roughly €200 per megawatt-hour, which is equivalent to about $350 per barrel of oil. But still, this winter's increased demand may cause gas prices in Europe to soar significantly higher, which would plunge the continent into a recession. Iran's accelerating nuclear program might lead to a foreign policy crisis that disrupts the world's oil markets. Iran's stores of highly enriched uranium at a level of 60%, which is very near to 90% weapons grade, are already sufficient to build a simple nuclear device. The US and Iran resumed indirect talks to re-enter the 2015 Iran nuclear deal on August 4 in Vienna, and the European Union on Monday put forward a final text to revive the deal. A senior EU official said a final decision on the proposal, which needs US and Iranian approval, was expected within very few weeks, according to Reuters news agency. there is no guarantee that Iran might agree to the deal. By reducing global oil supplies, political unrest in key oil-producing nations might push oil prices back up. For example, despite the agreement reached in July to halt the oil embargo on Libya, the country is still gripped by a severe political crisis that might cause the blockade to be reinstated. In fact, the country still has two politicians claiming to be the only prime minister, and both are supported by various armed factions currently engaged in conflict in Tripoli, the nation's capital. Goldman Sachs, the investment bank, said on Sunday the market will remain in unsustainable deficits at current prices. And balancing it will still require demand destruction on top of the ongoing economic slowdown.
Be aware with the world. APN Broadcast Service.